Princess Alara stood on the balcony of her room, the sun setting behind the mountains that surrounded the capital city of Solara. The orange glow bathed the gleaming towers and busy streets in a warm light, but the peaceful scene felt like a lie. Inside, the palace was on edge. She could feel it in the way the servants hurried through the halls, their faces drawn tight with worry. Her father, King Radovan, had been in tense meetings with his generals for days. Something was wrong. Alara was 13, not yet old enough to sit in on council meetings, but she was clever. She had heard the rumors, whispers of an approaching enemy, the Varrock Dominion. The Varrock were a fierce alien empire, known for conquering worlds and enslaving their people. Solara had always been a peaceful colony, distant from the major conflicts of the galaxy. Now, that peace was crumbling. Slipping from her room, Alara moved through the hidden servant passages, a network of tunnels she knew well from her childhood games of hide and seek. Tonight, she was not playing. She wanted to hear what was happening, to understand what her father was facing. Her heart raced as she reached the door behind the council chamber. The voices inside were raised, the discussion tense. "We can't win a direct fight." General Harlan's voice echoed through the door. "The Varrock's forces outnumber us 10 to 1. We must negotiate terms." "My people will not bow to invaders," her father replied, his voice calm but firm. "We've fought too hard to build this world. I will not surrender it." Alara's stomach twisted. She had always admired her father's strength, but she had never heard him sound so desperate. She pressed her ear closer to the door, straining to hear more. Suddenly, alarms blared through the palace, cutting through the conversation. The sound was followed by the heavy thud of distant explosions. Alara's blood ran cold. The Varrock had arrived. Chaos erupted inside the council chamber. She heard the scraping of chairs, the hurried footsteps of soldiers rushing to their posts. Alara backed away from the door, her heart pounding. The invasion was no longer a distant threat. It was here. As she turned to run back to her room, the door to the council chamber burst open. Captain Zara, the leader of the royal guard, spotted her immediately. His face was grim, and there was no softness in his voice as he ordered, "Princess, we need to go."
"Now?"
Alara hesitated for a moment, wanting to run to her father, but Zara grabbed her arm. "Your father's orders. We must get you to safety." The palace shook with another explosion, closer this time. Alara's mind raced as Captain Zara led her through the hidden passages. Her world, her home, was falling apart around her, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly powerless. Yet somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered, "You must survive. You must fight." Princess Alara huddled in the cold, damp tunnels beneath the capital, the weight of her father's death pressing down on her like a stone. The flickering lights above her head cast long shadows along the narrow walls, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the underground passages. It had been only hours since the Varrock invaded, but the world she had known felt like a distant memory. Captain Zara crouched beside her, his eyes scanning the tunnel entrance. "We're almost there, Princess. The Resistance has been hiding out in these tunnels for months, waiting for the Varrock to strike." His voice was steady, but Alara could hear the tension beneath it. He was trying to keep her calm, but nothing felt right anymore. They had fled through these tunnels after her father's council chamber had fallen. There had been no time for goodbyes. No time to process the loss. Just survival. Alara clenched her fists, trying to hold back her tears. Her father had always told her that the strength of a ruler came from within, from the ability to lead in the darkest moments. But how could she lead anyone when she couldn't even protect the people she loved? Suddenly, a dim light appeared ahead, and the sound of murmured voices reached their ears. Zara signaled for her to follow as they approached a large, hidden chamber. Inside, a group of ragtag soldiers and civilians stood huddled around makeshift maps and crates of supplies. Their eyes turned to Alara as she entered, whispers spreading through the room. They had all heard the news. The king was dead, and now, the fate of their world rested on the shoulders of a 13-year-old princess. A grizzled man in worn armor stepped forward, his eyes hard and doubtful. "So, this is our new leaders?" He glanced at Zara, then back to Alara. "What can a child possibly know about leading a war?" Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, each one questioning her, doubting her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The truth was, she didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to lead these people. She was just a girl who had lost her father, her home, and her world in a single day. But then, something stirred inside her, a spark of defiance. The same voice that had whispered in the chaos of the attack now spoke louder. "You must fight." She took a step forward, her voice trembling but steady. "I may be young," she began, "but I am not weak. My father taught me that the strength of a leader isn't in their age or their experience. It's in their will to protect their people. And I will not let the Varric take our home." The room fell silent. Some still looked doubtful, but others began to nod, their eyes lighting with hope. Alara's fear didn't vanish, but it shifted. She had no choice but to lead. There was no one else. The spark had been lit. The dim glow of the abandoned power station flickered ominously as Princess Alara stood at the edge of the crumbling industrial district. The distant hum of Varric patrols filled the air, their towering armored figures cutting through the city like shadows. She couldn't afford to let fear hold her back. Not now. Behind her, Captain Zara and a handful of resistance fighters crouched in the shadows, waiting for her signal. Their plan was risky, an all-out assault on the Varric supply line that controlled the flow of power to their forces. If they could take control of the station, they could disrupt the enemy's hold on the capital and give the resistance a fighting chance. But it was up to Alara to make the first move. "Princess, we can still wait for reinforcements," Zara whispered, his voice filled with concern. "You don't need to lead this charge yourself." Alara shook her head, determination hardening her features. "We've already waited too long. The Varric don't expect us to fight back here, and that's our only advantage. If we hesitate, we lose." Zara hesitated, then nodded, trusting her judgment. It was a strange feeling, having seasoned soldiers look to her for decisions, but she had earned their trust. Despite her youth, Alara's strategies had already proven effective in smaller skirmishes. She'd learned quickly, adapting her plans to exploit the Varric's arrogance and unfamiliarity with the terrain. Alara turned to the group, her voice low but firm. "We split into 3 teams. The first will sabotage the power lines running to the Varric base. The second will set traps along their patrol routes to slow down reinforcements. The third," she said, her eyes meeting each of their faces, "will come with me and take the control room." The soldiers nodded, grim but ready. She could see the weariness in their eyes, the fatigue of constant battle, the weight of loss. But there was also something else. Hope. Somehow, she had given them that. Moments later, they moved like ghosts through the rubble of the district, sticking to the shadows, avoiding detection. Alara's heart pounded in her chest as they approached the power station's control center. The old structure loomed ahead, rusted and worn but still functional. She glanced at Zara, who signaled for the team to move forward. The first explosion rocked the air, signaling the sabotage of the power lines. A moment later, the sound of gunfire erupted in the distance as the second team engaged the Varric patrols. It was chaos, and in the midst of it, Alara led her team into the control room. Inside, the Varric were caught off guard. Alara's team moved swiftly, taking out the guards with precision. She rushed to the control panel, her fingers shaking as she activated the power grid's override system. A loud hum filled the room as the lights flickered, and then, in a moment of triumph, the power shut down across the city. For a brief moment, Alara allowed herself to breathe. They had done it. The Varric supply lines were severed, and the city was plunged into darkness. But the victory was not without cost. Several of the resistance fighters lay wounded or dead, casualties of the battle. Alara stared at the fallen, her heart heavy with grief. She had led them here, and now they were gone. She wanted to scream, to cry, but there was no time. She had to keep moving. The Varric would retaliate, and they needed to be ready. As Captain Zara placed a hand on her shoulder, she nodded, her resolve solidifying. This was war. There would be losses, and she would carry them all. But she was no longer just a scared child running from the Varrock. She was their leader now, and she would see this through to the end. The streets of Solara were in flames. Smoke billowed into the sky, and the crack of gunfire echoed from every corner as the final battle for the capital raged. Princess Alara stood atop the wreckage of a fallen building, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield below. The Varrock forces were scattered, disorganized in the wake of the power station's destruction, but they were far from defeated. Around her, the resistance fought fiercely, emboldened by their recent victory. Word had spread quickly through the city of the young princess who had led the attack, and now, the people of Solara rose alongside her. They called her the Princess of Fire, a name that had ignited hope across the city. Alara could hardly recognize herself. Just days ago, she had been hiding in the tunnels, unsure of her place, but now, she led an army. The weight of leadership still pressed on her, but the fear that once paralyzed her had turned into something else. Resolve. Princess. Captain Zara's voice cut through her thoughts. He emerged from the smoke, bloodied but alive, his expression grim. Varrock forces are regrouping near the palace. We've stalled them, but they're still too strong. We need to strike now, or we'll lose the momentum. Alara's heart raced. She had known this moment was coming. The final confrontation. The Varrock commander, Overlord Threx, had taken the palace as his command center, daring her to challenge him. If they could take back the palace, the Varrock's hold on the city would crumble. But it was a gamble. Threx was ruthless, and he had the advantage of superior technology. I'm going in, Alara said, her voice steady. Zara's eyes widened. It's too dangerous. Let me. No, she interrupted, her gaze hardening. This is my fight. If I can distract Threx, you and the others can breach the palace from the rear. There was a brief hesitation before Zara nodded. He had seen what Alara was capable of. She was no longer just a princess. She was their leader, and her people would follow her to the end. With a deep breath, Alara descended into the heart of the battle, weaving through the burning streets as resistance fighters engaged the Varrock. The closer she got to the palace, the more intense the fighting became. Finally, she reached the gates, where Overlord Threx stood, towering over the battlefield in his gleaming armor. You? Threx's voice boomed, his cold, alien eyes narrowing as he spotted her. The little princess who thinks she can defy the Dominion. This world will be crushed, and you along with it. Alara met his gaze, unflinching. You underestimate us. You underestimate me. Without hesitation, she charged. Threx swung his massive weapon, but Alara was too quick, dodging and using the terrain to her advantage. She was smaller, more agile, and she used the Varrock's arrogance against him. With each attack, she forced him into a vulnerable position, all while Zara and the resistance closed in on the palace from behind. In the final moment, Alara spotted her opening. Threx, overextended in his fury, left his flank exposed. With a swift strike, she disabled his armor, and he fell to the ground with a roar of pain. The palace gates burst open as the resistance flooded in. The battle was over. The Varrock, leaderless and in disarray, retreated. Solara was free. As the sun began to rise over the smoldering ruins, Alara stood tall, watching the last of the Varrock ships disappear into the sky. She had led her people to victory, and though the cost had been great, they had won. She was no longer just a princess. She was a symbol of defiance, the fire that had sparked a revolution. The Princess of Fire had risen from the ashes.